Sometimes I hear that introduction thing. Is that really me? Okay. It's an absolute pleasure to be here again in Halifax. Last time I came was 2012, thanks to Pam Cooley's invitation, and got to meet the City Council. A very different Halifax in 2012 to now, not just what's happening on the streets, but I came when it was minus 18 degrees. I was actually entertained by skating on the Commons in the afternoon and got to understand what a wind chill factor actually feels like from a guy from California. And I intellectualized what minus 18 degrees was, but it wasn't until your fabulous airport doors opened and it just went like that. So ever since then, when it's like 5 degrees in San Francisco, I'm like, piece of cake. Let's get out the t-shirt, no problem. Okay, so we have a limited amount of time. I've got a lot of things to cover for you. We've had incredible speakers today giving you some very big picture, high-level things. I'm going to bring it down to the ground and do some practitioner-type stuff to tell you how to get things done. And we hear a lot of things and a lot of reasons why things can't get done, but they're excuses. And most of it is because they don't want to do it, okay? So you have to be the tenacious people in your community to want to get things done. So let's go from there. First of all, who's been to San Francisco? Show of hands. Oh my God, everybody. Okay, great. Great city. We love your tourism. Please come and please don't stay and then go. We love the sales tax, but we don't want to do with everything else that comes with it. The problem is that everybody comes to San Francisco, doesn't leave, and our city is growing tremendously. And some really good things happening in San Francisco, but some very tough things as well, which I'll touch upon. Big trends that are happening, not just in San Francisco, but all over the world, are these three big converging trends. You're going to hear them over and over again. But this idea that things are becoming much more shared, the idea that I have to own everything myself is starting to fade away. What's becoming much more popular is that I can share things, I can share experiences, I can have that thing in my hand, and then I can give it back. And it's a big change, not just demographically, but in terms of our overall concept of things and stuff. Electrification, whether it's just decarbonization or electrification, is a really big change as well. The number one difference is combustion engine vehicles have 2,000 plus parts. Electric transportation has about 20 parts. It's just a simpler, easier, more efficient thing to do. And finally, we're getting ourselves into that space. And automation, with all of the things that it has, all its promises, all of its risks, it's all starting to happen, and it will continue to grow. So, a lot of these big picture things, but let's go down to what we need to do about it. We need new types of people in our city governments that don't actually exist today. There's some remnants of it, but not really. And I was actually lucky when I was the Chief Innovation Officer to really start training new ways of doing what we're doing. We need data science. We need city scientists. They don't exist. Some know how to use Twitter a little bit or Facebook, and they know how to play with some data, but cities have reams of data and they're not utilizing them properly. So we need city scientists that understand how to use data. We need urban psychologists, people who understand. Anyone gone to couples counseling? We need those people, but for cities. We have opponents and proponents. I hear you, therefore, however, right? We need those kinds of urban psychologists to actually learn how to talk, how to bring people together, how to facilitate those really tough discussions. These are all need to be in university, and they're not being taught right now. So I had the privilege of meeting with some of the Dalhousie crew and said, these are the areas we need training on because there's a big gaps all over the world. And the third person is the storyteller. We are asking you to change. And what's the one thing we love not to do is change. We say, that's for the other person. I support bus lanes so that the other person can take transit so I can still drive, right? So we have to tell compelling stories. And these three people, I've put them as women because we need more women in these roles. Right? We need women scientists. We need women urban psychologists. We need women storytellers. We need all these positions. And half the population is women, folks. We don't need all these white guys anymore. So, white guys, time to give it over to the women. We need to move on, okay? So, one thing I always talk about when we have these panels is, are they male, are they pale, and are they stale? You know? And we need to move on. So, one thing to move on. Okay. So this is what I like to do, and this is why I was the Chief Innovation Officer. You've seen this diagram before, but this is what we used to do at SFMTA. We dream big, know how to have fun, and get shit done, right? And that's the people who I work with. Everybody else, you need to look for another job. So really important to think big, feel less, open up, say yes more than you say no, make stuff happen. Just start something. Start small, bet small, and then go big. Without that trajectory, it's really hard to get things done because you get stuck in the minutia. Okay. So this is what we taught our team this over and over again when we inherited this team. The most dangerous phrase in our work language is that we've always done it this way. Who's heard of this 100 times, right? Well, it's time to change. So let's move on. Let's zoom down to California. So those of you who don't know about California, we're the left coast, we're the People's Republic of California. We are very different from everybody else. We're kind of the Quebec of the US, kind of like we're like separate but equal kind of thing, but better. We're 40 million people, 400,000 square. We're 40 million people. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. We're slowly becoming the 4th largest economy in the world. If we were our own country, we'd just be a real force. Maybe we should be our own country. There's a big debate about that right now. The rest of the country is kind of doing their thing. We're saying we kind of disagree, so we're kind of doing our own thing. San Francisco, 8 million people. The city of San Francisco is like the thumb in your hand here. It's about 1 million people and a whole bunch of stuff happening there. This was supposed to be the other way around, so I'll just pretend we're going the other way. So we had this waterfront, couldn't use it, terrible, double-decker freeway, 60s planning, the worst things you could ever do. We did all of them in San Francisco, and then Mother Nature, the ultimate urban planner, said, this sucks, knocked it down. And we had a debate for 10 years, like, what should we do? We said, let's get rid of it. What's the world doing? We're making places for people, and goes backwards, that's what we created. So we took down a double-decker freeway that was federal, state, and locally, all these issues. We redesigned the street for people. We created a huge open waterfront. It's completely transformed San Francisco. Anybody who goes there now could not even imagine our waterfront completely closed off by a double-decker freeway. Our cousins to the north are tearing down their viaducts. Everybody's realizing this is the wrong way to do things. No more planning for cars, focus on planning for people. We had to also merge our teams. When I joined the team in San Francisco, I noticed we had planners who hated engineers, who hated transit planners, who hated bike stuff and walk. And it's like, you know what? We're all plan engineers. This is our title now. We're all work together. And we had advocates who hated our guts and said that we don't do enough. And we had other proponents and opponents saying we're doing too much. So we said, okay, we're plan engineers, but we're advocrats, right? We are activist bureaucrats, and that's how we get shit done. So we walk inside, we walk outside. Many of the folks in this photo here have gone on to lead other divisions or other agencies around the world, so it was a great launching pad to designing an excellent team. We had to rediscover the idea of community collaboration. We would have these like 3 meetings and a checklist. We did our community collaboration, we're done, peace out, drop, we're done, right? No, it was terrible. So we actually started going to the community and saying, what do you want? How do you want to change? Do you want to change? What does it look like? And who do we listen to and who don't we listen to? And we not just talked about diversity and inclusion, we actually did it. Less talk, less reports, get things done, right? And so we had a lot of plans, and you guys have lots of plans too, and these plans say everything you want to hear, but they don't deliver anything on the ground because they're all stuck in the 40,000-foot space. So what we created in our team was the actual real plans. The capital plan, where does the money go? Money is where policy is. What does your capital and operating budget actually do? How do you have work plans? Our work plans for our staff said you need to also interact with different parts of the agency. So we actually forced that interaction to happen. And we had an annual report that said, how are we doing with all the stuff we're saying we're going to do? And how do we break down these 25-year plans to quarterly, half-yearly, and yearly deliverables? And are we actually doing that? Oh, and by the way, advocacy groups, this is how you hold us to account, because we need you to be out there as well at the community meetings actually saying we actually want this stuff as well. So the first thing we did, and I think Benji was really good at promoting the systems change, we created an open database and invited everybody to start looking at all the different data sets we have, and we actually found out data that we didn't know we had as well. So this helped us all as a city figure out what do we actually have, what can we measure, what can we treasure. And from there we developed a really strong plan to say, this is what we think we're going to do. Based on all of the things, transportation is not a land use, but land use makes everything happen. So land use at the top, a transport department saying it's all about land use, right? Then it's all about travel demand management. Those 2 key pillars mean that now we can supply walkable streets, good transit, good bicycling, vehicle sharing and car sharing and shuttle services. Those pieces are the underpinning of a system. But that wasn't enough, folks. We had to throw in some free kitchen knives. We had to say, we also need to measure a baseline. Where are we as a city, and where do we want to go in the next 6 years? Our baseline was we had 62% of all trips by car and 38% by non-car. We simplified it. It wasn't bikes versus transit versus walking. It was, these are the people who drive by car, this is who does not drive by car. And how do we get it to more of a 50-50 balance, because that was easy to say back then. And so we also worked with our climate action plan and said, look, if we're doing zero waste, 100% renewable energy, and carbon farming, what's the transport mode? So that was that 50 that actually got to go in there as well. And we tied our development to all of our talks. So all these land use developers who are doing these long-range development plans, we said, okay, if you do all these long-range development plans, this is the impact of the transport system. We're not going to say no, but we're coming to every one of your planning meetings and saying, this is what transport you need to mitigate the stuff that you're doing from development. And not about widening roads, about getting people to use other modes of transport to get around. And so we actually started to do things called reading the street. We started reading the street very differently. Benji talked about level of service, and this was fine for level of service. The level of service would say, get rid of the tram and the bus and make it all for cars. And we stepped back and said, wait a second, everybody is in a vehicle of some sort, whether it's their own 2 feet or in a car or tram, and look how much space they're taking, and look who's getting priority, and look who's being valued. The good people in their cars that are taking up a whole lane of traffic measure up like 9 to 10 people, but there's 21 individuals on these little micro vehicles called bicycles, and 65 in a tram that are not even being acknowledged, right? So we reread the street and said, wait a second, let's redesign this. And we realized that congestion, which is the dumbest thing to chase for, you'll never solve for it, because congestion has nothing to do with infrastructure, parking, or cars. It's our work culture. The idea that our boss needs our butt on a seat at an office to just show up there is irrelevant these days. We can work from home, we can work from somewhere else. Those 2 peaks in our travel demand is because we need to show up somewhere and then leave from somewhere. If we can move that around a little bit, all this stuff goes away. So sometimes it's not even about infrastructure. The key we did was to look at the space allocation. We as humans take up about 1 square meter of space, depending on how much breakfast we've had, right? So it's about 1 square meter of space. If we're in a bicycle or some sort of scooter vehicle, whatever it is, it's a little less than 2 of those squares. We call these tiles in tech. 1 tile for a person, about 1.5 tiles for a micromobility vehicle. In a car, you need 8 tiles. 8 square meters of space just to get in the car, and you need another 8 square meters to safely drive with distance around you. So we need 16x the space to move a person in a polluting vehicle that kills people versus walking by yourself. What is wrong with this picture, right? So let's have a bit of a reality check on how we allocate space. The next time you hear, we don't have enough room for a bike lane, say, really? Let's really read the street and say, hang on a second, I object, to your projection. We also had to look at how we look at our space in terms of injuries and who's getting injured and where. So we used data for the first time to actually start mapping really hard things that we talked about but we couldn't actually visualize. So where people were getting injured was really important because it mattered where this was happening. In San Francisco, 75% of all serious injuries and fatalities are only on 13% of our streets. It's not a citywide problem. It's a very focused problem. Oh, and by the way, they happen to be overlaid over what we call communities of concern, which are generally new arrivals, people of color, or historically disadvantaged groups. So the most vulnerable are being the most exposed and being injured the most who can't afford to recover themselves. One of the biggest forms of bankruptcy is being injured and not being able to pay the bills. I mean, this is terrible stuff. So visualizing data is really important. We opened up in Papandreou to people for the first time a couple of years ago, and this became such a recurring theme that it's one of the biggest open street events in the country. Our trade associations, got to love the small business groups who say, we need the parking spot in front of our store, otherwise I'll go bankrupt. Really? Let's open that up and unplant that. We surveyed all of the users of these stores along certain corridors, this is Polk Street, and said, how do you get here and how much do you spend? People love talking about themselves, right? So they told us all these things, and we said, wow, trade association, look at this. People who come by car spend about $82 a month. Pretty good. But you know the people who actually come in by foot from their local neighborhood are spending more per month? This was like revolutionary. We also had people who said, don't confuse me by the data. They're the ones who voted for Trump. So, you know, these are the sort of things that happen. So, parklets. We focused on parklets. We're the first city in the world to really pioneer these parklets. We institutionalized this so any store could do a parklet whenever it wanted based on the framework. Again, we created the system which created the process. Some really good results, increase in bicycling and walking. We converted some spaces. People felt very safe along parklets, and it was a really great idea. We took that and turned it into a whole program called Playground and Ground Play, And we have over 75 projects across the city, whether it's making play streets, making fun, we're knitting jackets for trees, whatever it is, it's all about engaging the public and the community to basically own their neighborhood, own their street, and own their block, and to do things with that. We also started to change our maps. Mapping is a really important piece of information. Information is the new gold, as we say. So this is our transit map. People say, great, transit plan I think was amazing. 82 lines, 82 different colors. Can you read it? No. So we said, okay, let's ask the public, how do you want to actually use this map? They said, we don't understand how to use it at all. So we changed it and said, what if we actually just said red lines is less than 5 minutes, so it comes every 2 to 5 minutes all day long, and blue is 5 to 10 minutes and all day long. That's all you need to know. So really quickly it changed people's perspective on the legibility of the map. Right? We also did this thing where we said, you know, people wanted subways and everything. Everyone wants subways, and say, well, there's not much, we can't do this many subways. So we said, what can we do in 6 months and 12 months? Time-bound the discussion. They said, how about if you let us get on every door on the bus because it takes too long? 38% reduction in dwell time by allowing people to get on the bus door, any door, all the time. Right? The maps became very legible. We asked people to rate their ride like a Yelp restaurant. How was your ride? We actually need to know this stuff. Do you know how many transit engineers and transit planners did not want to know whether the customers actually liked the bus or not? So we need to know that stuff so we can do better and be better, right? Imagine integrating all of these different modes into one system. Like, this is not rocket science. We have this thing called a phone. We can do it. So let's just get this stuff done. Our bike network as well, our bike engineers, who are a really opinionated group, love to say we've got the most dense bike network in the country, right? It's like, but it doesn't actually work. So we actually asked the public and said, how do you feel when you cycle on these streets? Because why aren't the numbers improving and increasing? And they noticed that it's terrible. So we created this thing called a level of traffic stress that basically graded each block of the bike network and said, LTS1, everybody feels comfortable. LTS4, no one feels comfortable. And guess what? Most of the network was LTS4. So that gave us those policy roles now to go to the policymakers and say, we need to focus on these very targeted areas to create the outcomes that we want to see. And we shared the data with the public. Every time we did something and said, here's the before and the after, and this is what it looks like. So next time you want to yell at City Hall, we've got data to show how we've improved it. When we did bike sharing, we actually asked the public, where should the bike share locations be? It's your neighborhoods, you know where you want it better than we do. And they got to crowdsource and show it, and we actually implemented it. We changed the streets, so we put the policy of like, look, if transit and bicycling is really the most sustainable ways to get around, let's give red carpet for transit and green carpet for bikes and call it a day and start implementing it everywhere we can. We also had to look after the drivers. We can't ignore the drivers, but we said, look, what do drivers want? They want to get to the parking spot as quickly as possible. Okay, we created an app and a service to get them there, and they could get there 30% faster, less congestion, more reducing of GHGs. So everybody wins when you do things for multiple people. Elected officials took them out on bike rides. They could get comfortable with the idea of cycling, celebrate every one of our successes. This woman on the left-hand side is now our mayor of San Francisco. I'm in because she used to ride bikes with me all the time, so it's kind of cool. Making the system available for everybody, not just the millennial white guys. It has to be for everybody, right? And then just flipping the script. Don't have people on bicycles protecting cars from other cars. Have cars protect people cycling. They're vulnerable users, guys, not the people in 2-ton machines. And then open it to everybody, right? So this is, again, in Papandreou, open to everybody with this protected cycle track. So some data. Data is really important to tell a story. In 2004, Market Street, our busiest street, 1 bicycle for every 3 private cars. Fast forward, 4 bicycles for every 1 car because we took out the parking lane, replaced it with a protected bike lane. It's that easy, and it costs $100,000. You can't do this for less than $1 billion on transit. So this is how you get things done quickly and shift the discussion, right? Counters. Why do we have counters? Because it does 2 things. It counts the people, and it shows the people that they count, right? That they're important. Give me any naysayer and say, I'm going to put those 3,000 people back into cars. You want that? No. So let's move forward, right? Pilots, car sharing, bike sharing, scooter sharing, all the different sharing. Work with everybody because they're all part of the ecosystem. And we get results. We did all this stuff, whole bunch of different things, lots of pilots, lots of trials, lots of tests, lots of mistakes. Let's be clear. We learned, we iterated, and we met our 2018 target 3 years early. People didn't believe this. We had to take it to UC Berkeley to do the analysis and said, yep, they're good. So work with your university so you can get the results. And then now the next generation, just to wrap up because I know I'm going over time, is now we're going full ball. Okay, we did all the low-hanging fruit. We tripped over a lot of fruit on the way there, but now we're doing the full ball. So protected cycle lanes, now we've had a bit too many deaths in the last couple of years. We've had people being killed, which has been awful. So now we've got a mandate with this new mayor, that former person that was cycling with us and learning all this stuff. She's like, I challenge the MTA to do double the capacity every year. So looking at electric bicycles, electric scooters, they're all part of the mix. We've got to add everybody in the mix, move the cars outside of the way, allow accessible loading and unloading, allow different families to use, feel comfortable, allow people in different backgrounds and needs to feel included in the space, allow for multiple systems to happen at the same time, protected bike lane, bus boarding island, accessible loading zone, micro-mobility hub, they can all coexist, rain garden for all the greenies, we can do all this stuff together, right? It all works. Actually show people what they're supposed to do, and they'll do it. Allocate space for scooters, they won't be cluttered on the street, but you've got to show people what to do, otherwise they don't know what to do. And then this is what it looks like. So this is the bike lane network, this is the protected bicycle network, this is what it's on its way to now. So show people how we're moving, and then at the very end, these things happen organically where these new developments in the city, we actually have a $100 mobility pass that we put into policy now where every new condo unit requires a mobility pass as part of their body corporate fees. And now you get people who can actually not have to need a car because they can get around with all these other modes. And so while this new tech can be very isolating, here's the latest protest on the street, there's also some hard realities that taxis weren't really offering rides to people that were different than me. And so we have to have some of this reality check with technology. And yes, there are some issues that we need to deal with. This is typical San Francisco protesting. But there's also some good things as well. This is our first major stadium built in downtown San Francisco. No parking at all. And that screen is not the scoreboard of all the wins of the games. It's all your transport options that are available. It's right there inside the stadium and right outside the stadium. And it opened a couple of weeks ago with no traffic problems. This newspaper hates us, the MTA, when I used to be the MTA, and they said, no traffic, no problems, there's no story. So that was really cool. City Innovate, again, that focus on tech and governance. Government can be a force for good. At the end of all this, though, we need government working with the community, working with the corporations and our research institutions because we're entering a new era of complexity that requires real collaboration. So I'll leave you at that and thank you so much for your time.